crouching vigilantes are least likely to kill you, intentionally or otherwise.
Don't listen what your girlfriend says. She reads those magazines that say you failed the test. You don't have what she needs. I'll slither like a viper and get you by the neck.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Chamber of the Wraith. My name is Brian, and today we're going to be doing a little more speculation and theory crafting. However, unlike some of my last videos, two of them in particular, one of them was a collab, which was really fun to do. I'm actually going to be steering it towards Mortal Kombat 11. Quite the divisive Mortal Kombat game, if that's anything to go by, but one that has been seeing more support than any other NetherRealm property, which is a promise they actually kept when they released Melina, Rain, and Rambo back in December. Usually, what happens is that we get one final DLC thing right around year one officially, and then by the time we get Kombat Pack 2, we would have gotten the announcement of the next game, meaning that support was officially done. Now, what is worth noting is that since that release, they're technically done. They technically don't have to do anymore because they fulfilled that promise. And in fact, it is worth noting that in some of the promotional material for Kombat Pack 2, it's noted that the roster is complete, the complete 37 character roster. Does that mean that Mortal Kombat 11 is done? It's a possibility that we have to consider, especially considering that NetherRealm is now working motion capture stuff again, which could be Injustice 3, could be a new property, could be whatever. But I'm going to be going a slightly different route, the route that I think they'll actually be going considering the climate of the world at the minute, which is to say they'll probably stick with Mortal Kombat 11 because A, it's a lot easier to stick with a game that you're already making than making a new one, especially considering that there's still a global pandemic running around. 2, the Mortal Kombat movie is coming out in April this year, so they're going to want to be promoting that. So we're definitely going to be seeing something relating to that. A little bit of a tease. And number 3, the optics of a game lasting longer than a year but not lasting 2 years is not that great. So if it at least lasts 2 years, the optics are going to look a little bit better, and they can definitely say we lasted longer than with MK11 than we did with any other property that we have. So today, I want to tackle the idea of a Kombat Pack 3. Now, I know this is a bit of an oddity to be tackling, considering, but there's plenty of reasons why Kombat Pack 3 will be coming, which I have listed before. There it is. Okay, so I have a list of 6 main characters alongside several honorable mentions that I want to go through with you guys and discuss. Now, one thing I do want to let you know about is that it feels really strange to me that Aftermath got 3 characters, which made sense, it was an expansion, but then they made Kombat Pack 2 have half the characters of Kombat Pack 1. One had 6, the second had 3. A little bit of an odd thing. I do this because I can't actually do that thing. But the thing to consider with this Kombat Pack is we don't know for sure. We don't know for sure the size of Kombat Pack 3. A lot of people are saying it's going to be 6. Some are saying 3. I'm going to play both sides. I'm going to play it very, very safe and say the first 3 characters are probably going to be the ones if the Kombat Pack is 3 characters. Then the next 3 will be in if Kombat Pack 3 is actually 6 characters. And then the honorable mentions are characters that could happen in one form or another, but might not happen for Exhibit A, Exhibit B, what have you. There are factors that are too big not to consider, but at the same time are not all that likely. There are ones that I'm like, you know, that could actually happen. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the roster list. as I alluded to before, there is one character that is almost a certainty for Kombat Pack 3 because of what that character is going to promote. Now, something that I think is rather interesting before we get into who it is that because this is a character original to the Mortal Kombat movie, he would almost be a guest character because Cole Young, yes, we're talking about this guy, has not appeared in an official Mortal Kombat video game in any capacity. He is about as official to the Mortal Kombat lore as the Krillin? I think it's Krillin, and Baron Raylan from the Mortal Kombat Conquest TV show. You know, not very. But, at the same time, there have been characters that have shown up from outside media that have become official in the video games before. Namely, Quan Chi, who actually first shows up as an antagonist in the Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm animated TV show. Yeah, that old chestnut. So, Cole Young, while he kind of is a guest character, he kind of isn't. And he would be almost a Tremor-like figure. Somebody who comes out of nowhere from a property of Mortal Kombat lore that hasn't seen the light of day in video games before and comes in and becomes a proper Mortal Kombat character in a video game. Now, Cole Young, played by Manchester, England's very own Lewis Tan, is definitely going to be an interesting chestnut to see because, one, we still don't have a trailer at the time of recording, which is February 4th of 2021. And two, he's in a movie, so they're almost certainly not going to use anybody else. They will get Lewis Tan to come to the studio to do motion capture for the face and fight stuff. So that, in a sense, they're injecting Lewis Tan into Mortal Kombat 11 via his character Cole Young. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see. I had to get this guy out of the way first, however, because, come on, if you thought that Cole Young was not going to be in Mortal Kombat 11 to promote the Mortal Kombat movie, honestly, you're a little bit delusional. I mean, why are guest characters a thing? They promote something for the studios. They help bring awareness to a brand that might have been dead for a little while, as you can see, as you can actually see. I'm going to provide an example of this, and of course, to help make the companies money. Now, the promotion aspect is huge because, of course, they're going to promote this movie pretty hard when things start going. You're going to start seeing trailers and all of that sort of thing. And what better way to promote a character for the launch of a movie than to have them come out around the same time as the movie. Maybe a little bit afterwards to avoid spoilers or whatever, but, you know, around that time, or even slightly earlier to get you, hey, Mortal Kombat's coming out in a week. I'm going to play as the character early to maybe get a little sense of what's going on, and I'm going to watch the movie afterwards. That's what they're hoping for, these advertising folks. To go back to the point of bringing awareness to things. Oops, that is the wrong screen. It's a good thing that I didn't have anything too crazy hidden in there. Oh shoot. Make that display 1, please. Thank you. There we go. Alright, so here we are. And I'm just going to move myself to the side just a little bit because, as you can see, I have pulled up the Licensed Global article that made the rounds a little while ago, which was talking about how Fortnite, Mortal Kombat, World of Tanks, and more were included in a, quote, new deal to promote familiar action heroes from the 80s and 90s, the new generation of gamers and fans through downloadable content licenses. But here's the thing. All of the deals that you can see here have already happened. Rambo just happened back in December. Rambo and Snake Plissken from Escape from New York have already happened. Terminator 2 Judgment Day for Fortnite, that happened. And also the Terminator was in Mortal Kombat 11 way back in, I want to say, July of last year. Michael Myers for Dead by Daylight, and Ash Williams for Evil Dead: The Gang. Other examples are these are the examples of the things being run by creative licensing and such. This is the second biggest reason why license deals happen. If somebody isn't going to be promoting anything, or if there's a new property that isn't being promoted, it's to bring awareness of that, to bring the demand for something from your Rambos and your Terminators and your Halloweens and whatnot in order to get another one going. And usually this is still within a few years, it looks like. So, because Evil Dead just had the TV show finish, Halloween had the 2018 movie, the Terminator had Dark Fate, for better or for worse, depending on who you ask. Rambo had, I believe it was Last Blood that came out in 2018. And the one that stood out to me in particular, I highlighted, is Escape from New York, which, I'm going to very quickly do some research. The last Escape from New York movie was there no sequel? Yeah, a sequel and a remake. Okay, so it looks like there was a remake for Escape from New York being worked on as early as March of 2017. The article that I got this from. And then some of the sources you can see here and here. But so far, nothing has happened out of that. Escape from New York is, as far as action movies go, a fairly obscure set of work because it hasn't had a half a dozen sequels like the Terminator has, for instance. So, relatively speaking, I don't think. I think the Escape from New York thing is a particularly good example of something that gets the demand going, so that to put a little more pressure to get that Escape from New York remake out is the sort of idea. But in the case of Cole Young, the reason why I went on this whole freaking tangent thing is that he's directly promoting the movie. He's also directly bringing awareness to the Mortal Kombat property by having that sort of cross-promotion, and of course, whether Mortal Kombat ends up in theaters or on HBO Max, I believe it is doing both. That could potentially bring a small spike in subscribers to HBO Max because people who played the Mortal Kombat game might see this character, this Cole Young, want to know who he is, find out he's in a movie that is out on HBO Max, sign up to HBO Max, there you go. So that is why Cole Young being in this, being in either form of the Kombat Pack, is not only obscenely obvious, it is like the most obvious thing. Like, if they don't do this, I will genuinely be shocked that, wait, they're not putting the movie character in the game to promote it? That's literally the point of it. Now it's time to move on to the next character, who I think some of you are going to be disappointed in, but come on, this is quite realistic as well for multiple reasons, as I will explain. So, the next character that we need to talk about is a DC guest. And I know, the Joker was already, a joke. Trust me, I would be the first one to tell you that. However, my personal pick for a DC guest, so a little bit of bias admittedly, actually has quite a realistic chance. Now, here's the thing about this particular character. It almost certainly isn't any of the characters that you have seen skins for before. So, Killer Croc, gone. Darkseid, gone. Catwoman, gone. Harley Quinn, gone. The Batman Who Laughs, thank Christ, gone. However, there is one guest character from DC that would work extremely well, not only because he's brutal, bloody, and violent, not only because he is he made a cameo in a movie that is tied to a property that's to a movie that is coming out relatively soon that has gotten the internet set ablaze. He was also in a Mortal Kombat game before. Yes, Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe is going to get its second versus DC Universe is going to get its second representative. Now, who is that going to be? Well, first off, fun fact, every single DC Mortal Kombat character in MK vs. DC has transitioned over to Mortal Kombat 11 as of Shang Tsung being released in the first Kombat Pack. Kano, Sonya, Liu Kang, Jax, they're all here. And in fact, extra fun fact, this is the first time we actually see Mileena get one of her moves stolen. Kitana straight up steals her sister's ball roll in this game. So, the thieving of Kitana runs deep. But, of all of the characters on the DC side, who of these characters do you think is the most likely to end up in the game? Deathstroke. And yes, I did change my shirt specifically to allude to this character. But, while I wasn't the hugest fan of Deathstroke for a while, until relatively recently, Deathstroke is actually one of the best DC characters you could have picked for a Mortal Kombat guest. First off, he bloodily and brutally beats Batman down. He's beaten Batman multiple times before, so he has the caliber to beat these guys. He has shed a lot of blood, as I'm sure you're aware, and he would help promote a property. See, who here remembers Zack Snyder's Justice League? Yes, I'm going there. So, as you're aware, Deathstroke kind of makes a cameo at the end of Batman vs. Superman. And apparently, the man is coming back, John Megali... how the hell do you say his name? Joe Manganiello. If I said that name wrong, please let me know. You certainly look the part. I'll just call him Joe. Joe is apparently back inside of the Zack Snyder's Justice League movie shooting new scenes. Which is huge, because he already made the cameo, and if he's shooting new scenes, he's gonna be in the movie. And if he's gonna be in the movie, or has a very good chance of being in the movie, who better to promote Zack Snyder's Justice League, which is coming to HBO Max. God, I sound like a Warner Brothers press executive or something. Anyway, point is, who better to promote that than a character from the movie, and who better to pick than the deadliest assassin that the DC Universe has, and one of the just straight up nastiest overall. Because again, blood and guts and gore are kind of Deathstroke's thing. So, yeah, unfortunately, DC fans, you're gonna have to swallow Deathstroke for this one. But I genuinely think that behind Cole Young, Deathstroke is actually one of the most likely characters to show up in this Kombat Pack. So, there it is. And now, we finally get to a character that has actually starred in a video game first. And she has had a hell of a track record lately, and I couldn't be happier. Okay, we need to talk about Nitara. Yes, I know, Nitara. Some of you people are probably looking at me like, what the fuck are you talking about? And who the fuck are you talking about? Okay, real quick. Nitara was a character from the 3D era of Mortal Kombat games, i.e., I believe she made her debut in Deadly Alliance. I'm going to double check so I don't get this wrong. The last thing I need to do is be wrong about one of my favorite 3D era characters. Yes, she first appeared in Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. So, what is her deal? She's a vampire. Basically, she's a vampire from a realm of vampires that gets absorbed by Shao Kahn into an orb, and then she has to go rescue said orb in order to separate the orb from that realm from Outworld. She even enlists Cyrax's help to do it, which is really, really cool. But on the topic of Nitara, the reason why I say she's been making a hell of a wave through this is, first off, she made an appearance in a movie. She made a cameo appearance in Mortal Kombat Legends Scorpion's Revenge, giving Johnny Cage one pissed off expression. And then, it turns out, she's apparently actually going to be in the Mortal Kombat movie alongside Cole Young. They even had her casted, with Aquaman stunt double Elisa Cadwell playing Nitara. Which means that one of the most obscure 3D era characters of all time is getting the cinematic movie treatment before several classic characters do. I mean, Stryker isn't in the movie, as far as I know, and I'm pretty sure Baraka isn't. Plus, if I remember correctly, he was shafted from the first 2 Mortal Kombat movies. It's just crazy to me that a 3D era character can garner that much attention in such a short period of time. That it feels weird that that it feels weird not to have Nitara in this sacred, near-guaranteed position. Again, because of the movie, which probably means we're going to get a movie skin alongside both of her Deadly Alliance skins to some degree. And on top of that, you have to consider the fact that, well, people have been asking for Nitara for some time now, too. They've wanted Nitara to be in previous Mortal Kombat games for a while, but other characters have gotten in her stead. Boraicho from Deadly Alliance, Kenshi from Deadly Alliance and Deception, Frost from Deadly Alliance. There seems to be a pattern here. So if we were going to have a 4th character from Deadly Alliance show up, Nitara seems to be the most likely candidate, and one I would actually quite welcome because I'm a big fan of Nitara personally. Now we're going to move on to the next set of characters. These are characters that I think have a really good shot at making it in if this is a 6-character combat pack, but if it isn't, I would be a little shakier on that. These first 3 were almost shoo-ins, in my personal opinion. Nitara, you could make an argument for, but again, her being in the movie that is going to be promoted via Cole Young, I won't be surprised if they actually decide to try it. So, let's move on to the next set of characters, shall we? Alright, so, I was going to do a bit with all of this, but unfortunately, kind of flubbed it with Nitara, so it's not going to be perfect. I do apologize for that, but yes, there's a bit involved in this, so stay tuned for more! One thing to keep in mind is that this next character and Nitara are tied-ish. Nitara just edges him out because of the fact that she's probably going to be in the movie, but if she doesn't make it in, he makes it in instead. That makes a perfect amount of sense. If you're wondering who I'm talking about, let's go to Mortal Kombat X first. There were 8 newcomers at launch, and 5 of them ended up in Mortal Kombat 11. I'm talking Kotal Khan, Aaron Black, Devora, Cassie Cage, and Jackie Briggs, right? And the 3 that didn't were Ferrator, Kun Jin, and the next character on this list. And yes, I'm talking about Takeda. Wait, what? I'm talking about Takahashi Takeda. You know, Whip Boy? Yeah, not the Japanese pharmaceutical company. Get an image of him up on there. Jeez. Can't find good help these days. Anyhow, let's talk Takeda. Why in the Sam hell am I saying that Takeda is gonna be here? Well, it should actually be fairly obvious. People want this kid, and they've been wanting this kid since before the game came out. When Cassie Cage was revealed to be coming back, people wanted Takeda next. I personally thought that Takeda was going to be in there before Jackie Briggs did. Then Jackie Briggs showed up, and it turned out that via the leak, Takeda was nowhere to be seen. So the demand to make Takeda DLC started gaining steam. Except that never happened either, at least to date. So Takeda has become one of the most requested characters for Mortal Kombat 11, and it would make a whole lot of sense if Takeda showed up in this, considering he's been in multiple endings and has been name-dropped in several intros. People want Takeda. The question then becomes, how do you pull him off? And this is not a gameplay thing, but at least from a gear perspective, I can tell you that the 2 of the skins are going to be the first Takeda skin we've seen in MKX, where he's all armored up, and then his Chujin skin. I also can safely presume that his gear is going to be stuff like whips and swords and masks and things. But that's all I can defer to from a gameplay perspective. I just know that people want Takeda in, and he has a very likely shot of being in this game. But let's move on to number 5, a character that, unlike all of the others so far, has had a brand new design in Mortal Kombat 11 that has gone virtually unused. What? floofy for this one, but more so red, because the next character we're going to talk about is another ninja. I really don't like that term, actually, but at least when describing Mortal Kombat characters, but I know why it exists. However, the important thing I need to mention is that the fact that Rain has become DLC despite him breaking 2 rules. One being more of an actual rule, which was that they didn't want to repeat DLC characters. Now that they have with Rain, that possibility is basically endless. And 2, which is less of a rule than an expectation considering. Do you remember when Rain was revealed to be one of Shang Tsung's attacks where he got his super kick? We thought that basically meant that can deconfirm Rain. Well, since it didn't, that leaves the door open for the other 3 ninjas that ended up in Shang Tsung's moveset to come back as well. And the most likely of those 3 is actually the only one that got a brand new design in recent memory for Mortal Kombat 11. Ermac. Yes, this is actually Ermac's design in Mortal Kombat 11. He shows up in the crypt when you grab his amulet in order to open up the soul things, and he also has a render in the game. This is a hell of a look for Ermac, and it surprises me that they gave the guy a new design, but didn't bother implementing him in the game, leading me to believe that he was supposed to be in the game, but ended up getting cut relatively early on, for whatever reason. Which means, as a cut character, he stands a pretty good chance of coming back. Another thing worth noting is that Ermac is very popular! Of course he is. He's a classic ninja. He is going to be a fairly popular character. But Ermac in particular was a very popular character, especially back in the MKX days. Now, I can see for skins, and we're going to talk more about the skins because I actually have ideas for skins here outside of, Deathstroke and Nitara and all of them, well, I'm expecting something like his MK9 look, his MK11 look, probably a classic skin, even though, let's be honest, that ship should have sailed a long fucking time ago. And, of course, maybe MKX Ermac, but I don't know how you would make that different because of the hood and whatnot, and the bandages and all of that stuff. But I'm sure there's a way you can make that work, and I'm really sure that of any of the ninjas supposed to come back, because Ermac has a brand new design, he is the most likely shout to get a new design. But as we'll talk about in the honorable mentions, I think somebody else also has a pretty good shout out coming in as well. Now, let's take a look at our final entry, who is a guest character, but I think a guest character that people probably should be expecting. The 90s! You gotta love them! I mean, crying out loud, Mortal Kombat is a child of the 90s. It came out in 1992. And the thing with that is that because of the 90s reputation for being ultra-violent, when really it had more of a reputation of just being extremely weird with a dash of ultra-violence, what kind of character do you think best fits Mortal Kombat 11? If you're thinking Charmander, you are thinking very, very wrong, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Poor little guy doesn't deserve to get his head cut off. If anything, he deserves to take selfies with Cassie Cage, but that's besides the point. What other 90s characters do you think we can take a look at? Because it was also announced that 80s action characters were off the table now, because Rambo was one of the last ones to kind of close that out, which also partially leads to the discussion of, oh, is this the last DLC to Kombat Pack 2? It is, but keep our options open. Don't forget that. But they never excluded video game characters. And this seems like a bit of an odd thing to not exclude, considering that Mortal Kombat is in and of itself a video game franchise. Yet, unlike every other video game franchise that generally has guest characters, Mortal Kombat seems to have this weird refusal to not include them. They've only ever had one, in Kratos. And as you can imagine, almost every other fighting game has had their own video game guest characters. They almost never grab guest characters from outside of video games, with the exception of like Tekken with Negan and a few others that are escaping me. However, if they want to come back to video games, and they want to do the 90s, and they want to keep with the action hero theme, there is, without a shadow of a doubt, that Doomslayer is the character to choose for this sort of thing. Now, I know what a lot of people are going to say. Another gun character! Don't panic. Don't panic for a second. Remember the last time we panicked about Rambo just being a gun character? He doesn't even always use a gun in his variations. The one gun move he has is an equipable attack. Everything else is bombs and bows and arrows and traps. Yeah, the Terminator uses a shotgun and RoboCop uses a pistol, but other than those guys, most of the gun stuff has actually been kept to a relative minimum with the guest characters. I mean, Spawn has to equip either of his gun attacks in order to use guns. Joker has a gun hidden in a Batman doll, which is a cute little novelty. And all the Special Forces characters, except for like Cassie Cage, have some form of super gun. You know, energy pulse rings and whatnot. So, the Slayer, I wouldn't be nearly as worried about in regards to the gun. Yes, he's gonna have guns, of course. It's his whole fucking shtick. But if you've played Doom Eternal, you know he has more than just guns to work with. He has the Doom Blade. He has the equipment launcher. He has his bare fucking hands and ginormous boots. This man can do up-close combat, and he will do up-close combat in extremely brutal ways. Plus, you know, Doom Guy just fits. He's a crazy Space Marine Demon Slayer. That kind of bonkers yet violent concept is perfect for Mortal Kombat. And if you don't think so, Raiden is a god of thunder. Scorpion is an undead fire ninja. Jax is a soldier dude with mechanical arms. And Baraka is a mutant from another world with giant teeth and swords implanted in his arms. And that is just for starters. Mortal Kombat is all about the ridiculous. And Doomslayer fits that kind of ridiculous perfectly. And thus I think the Slayer has a damn good shot at making Mortal Kombat 11 as a guest character. Those are my 6 characters for the combat. Cole Young, Deathstroke, Nitara, Takeda, Ermac, and the Doomslayer. However, I should make mention of the honorable mentions now, because 2 of them might come to the game in a way that isn't a combat pack, and the other guy, well, as hard as it might be to get him in the game because he doesn't have an original design, if it weren't for that, he'd be just as likely as Ermac. And I'm not changing shirts anymore for the rest of the video because that gag has run its course. Now, the one thing worth keeping in mind is that most of these characters are definitely requested and definitely have a shot. They're honorable mentions for a reason, after all. I wouldn't put Stryker or Charmander on the fucking Mortal Kombat list if I didn't think there was at least a shadow of a chance that they would show up. But the thing is with these honorable mentions is that 3 of them are actually technically already in the game with their own movesets. They're just not playable. And yes, I am talking about Cyrax and Sector and Kronika. Now, it's worth keeping in mind that Cyrax and Sector can be played in Mortal Kombat 11 if you have a PC and some really clever mods. And they also boast original designs, which includes some incredibly sick concept art that I found looking around thanks to NetherRealm concept artist Emmanuel Julian. Seriously, check out some of this art. My god! But Cyrax and Sector, in particular, are characters that people want coming back. They're cyber ninjas. I mean, at least with the cyber ninja concept, I can let that slide because at least it has a prefix that actually makes sense to the character. Them being playable with their own movesets, mind you. Granted, their movesets were ripped off from Triborg with their own little flair. But this wouldn't actually be the first time that a non-playable character became playable DLC in Mortal Kombat. And a lot of you Edenian fans would probably know who I'm talking about, but in case you don't, I'm talking about Tanya. Yeah, if you didn't remember, Tanya made an appearance in the Mortal Kombat X story mode as a character you fight not once, but twice, with an incomplete but fairly similar moveset to what she would boast in Mortal Kombat X as a DLC character with her thankfully updated design. Now, the thing with Tanya was that she was one of the first DLC characters for Mortal Kombat X. She wasn't the very first. That distinction actually goes to Jason Voorhees, but she was right after the big guy as the first Mortal Kombat DLC character to show up. And as a result, she was met with quite a bit of fanfare, and the hope that multiple other NPCs in Rain, in Baraka, and in Sindel would show up as DLC down the line, which unfortunately never happened. However, Cyrax and Sector could happen, but the main problem is that they're a 2-for-1 deal. And I feel like with these two in particular, because they are a 2-for-1 deal in the game, you don't want them to be separated into combat packs in any way, shape, or form. You want them to be released either at the same time or around the same time. Like, the release schedule has to be, like, back-to-back. So, I personally am of the mindset that if we do get a combat pack with either of these bots, and presumably both of these bots, they will be a simultaneous release of some sort, which is not that unheard of with Mortal Kombat 11, because remember, the Aftermath characters came out at the same time, and so did the Combat Pack 2 characters. They weren't staggered like Combat Pack 1 was. But if these guys do get released simultaneously, I do have to warn you guys, there's probably not going to be a human skin for these bots, I'm afraid. But that's neither here nor there. An updated moveset for Cyrax and Sector to show up in the game makes a whole lot of sense. Which brings us to Kronika. Now, Kronika is a much more divisive character than the Borgs, and that's partially because she's not that great of a villain, let's be honest. But the thing is that every single NetherRealm made game, after Mortal Kombat 9 had playable bosses. The final boss for Injustice 1, Superman. All they did was give him, I think, 20% more health, and his trait lasted twice as long without a cooldown. That was the thing that they did to make Superman a boss character. Then in Mortal Kombat X, Shinnok became playable. You couldn't play as corrupted Shinnok, so that's a bit of a half point, but you could still play as Shinnok proper, and Goro as a sub-boss was DLC. Then there's Injustice 2, where Brainiac was playable, and not just playable, but fully playable. The only thing that really stopped you was his boss gimmick of being able to control the ship, which wouldn't really work outside of the Brainiac ship thing anyway. Hell, he even uses some of his custom abilities in the boss battle, so that's pretty cool. And then with Mortal Kombat 11, we got Kronika, who is not playable, which was a bit of a weird swerve, if I gotta be honest. Because, and the same goes for Fire God Liu Kang. It's a bit of an odd swerve that Kronika and Fire God Liu Kang both did not become playable. Now, Liu Kang is obviously playable in Mortal Kombat 11, and Fire God Liu Kang is just adding lightning accents to certain things. But that's why I'm not really counting Fire God Liu Kang in this episode. But Kronika has a brand new moveset and all sorts of gimmicks. The only thing is, she's straight up not playable. And I'm of the mindset that Kronika ought to be playable. I mean, for the longest time I thought she was, until an IGN Brazil article came out that said, yeah, no she isn't. Which kind of put a downer on my end, but Kronika as a brand new character ought to be playable in some way, shape, or form, and I think they'll do it in the form of DLC if they ever decide to do it. Because they would have to change a lot about Kronika and how she operates in order to make her properly playable. Namely, the fact that she can't technically be knocked down, the fact that she can't be grabbed, the fact that she transforms and has stages and changes the stage and all of that. That stuff would have to get changed, but it would be the perfect way to get some DLC in the system. Kronika is now playable in that sort of sense. And finally is the one character that is a true honorable mention, because not only is he not already in the game, well, outside of a cameo where he doesn't have a new appearance, and not only was he originally thought to have been deconfirmed thanks to Shang Tsung, the little guy's a classic. I say the little guy. The guy's a classic. And classic characters, as much as I hate to say this, hold a hell of a lot more sway than most other characters. And who wouldn't want to play as the original secret character, Reptile? Yes, Reptile, I think, has a really good shout at coming into Mortal Kombat 11, potentially. I don't think he's going to end up in some weird ninja pack or anything like that, but if Ermac doesn't make it in, I think Reptile is the second most likely character to potentially take that spot if we're talking ninjas. He was in Mortal Kombat 1. He is the most iconic of the secret ninjas. He is a lizard man, which means you can have all kinds of interesting gimmicks with him in this game. Particularly if NetherRealm weren't cowards and gave him his fucking tail back like in Deadly fucking Alliance. And, of course, there's the classic ninja angle that you can tell. Really, again, I've harped on this one enough, but Reptile is a very, very popular character. So if Ermac, who has an original design and is about as popular, doesn't make it in, Reptile has a really good shot at making that fifth slot for that combat pack, personally speaking. But since Ermac has that new design, I had to push Reptile down to honorable mentions. That's basically every character that I wanted to make mention of in this Kombat Pack 3 hypothesis speculation thing. I want to know who you guys think should be, not necessarily who you want, I should make this clear, but who you think is the most realistic pick for Kombat Pack 3. Because we can make fan wish lists all day, and quite frankly, I would make this a fan wish list if I wanted to, but I want it to also be extremely realistic. And this list of 6, Cole Young, Deathstroke, Nitara, Takeda, Ermac, and the Doomslayer, are probably the most realistic picks that you could really have. Although, Doomslayer is a little bit wishy-washy because the one thing holding him back is the fact that NetherRealm Studios apparently doesn't like video game guests, so we'll see. But I genuinely think that Doomslayer has a really good shot. So, that being said, don't forget to be awesome. I'll see you guys on the other side, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye!